The morning sun painted golden streaks across the windows of Windsor Castle as 10-year-old Prince George walked quietly through the long corridors. Unlike other children his age who might run and make noise, George moved with careful steps, always mindful of the people working around him. His mother, Princess Catherine, had taught him that true royalty meant caring for others, especially those who served the family. George noticed everything, though he rarely spoke about what he saw. He watched the castle staff working hard every day, cleaning the endless rooms, preparing meals, and maintaining the beautiful gardens. While other members of the royal family were busy with official duties, George found himself drawn to the quiet moments when he could observe the real people behind the grand palace walls. On this particular morning, George saw Mrs. Eleanor Davies struggling with a heavy cart of fresh linens. She was an older woman who had worked at the castle for 30 years, and George could see the strain on her face as she tried to push the cart up a slight incline in the hallway. Without hesitation, George approached her quietly. "May I help you with that?" he asked softly, his voice barely above a whisper. Mrs. Davies looked surprised and immediately tried to bow, but George gently shook his head. "Please, just let me help," he said, placing his small hands on the cart next to hers. Together, they pushed the heavy load to its destination. "Thank you." "Your Royal Highness," Mrs. Davies said, her eyes moist with unexpected emotion. George simply smiled and continued on his way, not knowing that this small act would be the first of many that would eventually reach the ears of everyone in the castle. Later that same day, George found himself in the castle kitchen during lunch preparation. The head chef, Marcus Sullivan, was frantically trying to manage his team as they prepared for an important state dinner. One of the junior cooks had called in sick and the kitchen was understaffed. George watched as Marcus wiped sweat from his forehead, clearly stressed about meeting the deadline. Without being asked, George quietly picked up a basket of fresh herbs that needed to be sorted and began organizing them by type. His movements were careful and precise, and he worked in silence so as not to disturb the busy kitchen staff. Marcus noticed the young prince working diligently in the corner and felt a warmth spread through his chest. Here was a future king, helping with the most basic kitchen tasks without any expectation of recognition or praise. "You don't need to do that, Your Highness," Marcus said gently. George looked up with his serious blue eyes. "I want to help," he replied simply. "Everyone here works so hard." That afternoon, word began to spread quietly among the staff about the young prince's kindness. The castle workers shared stories during their breaks, each tale more touching than the last. They spoke of how George always said please and thank you, how he remembered their names, and how he seemed to genuinely care about their well-being. James Mitchell, one of the royal guards, had worked at the castle for 15 years. He had seen many royal children grow up, but Prince George was different. James noticed how the boy would pause to listen when staff members spoke to him, giving them his full attention as if their words were the most important thing in the world. One evening, James was standing guard outside the main dining room when George approached him. The prince carried a small plate with a sandwich and a cup of tea. "I thought you might be hungry," George said quietly, offering the plate to the surprised guard. "Your Highness, I cannot accept this," James replied, though he was deeply moved by the gesture. "Please," George insisted. "You've been standing here for hours. My grandmother always says that taking care of others is the most important job anyone can have." James accepted the food with gratitude, and as he watched the young prince walk away, he felt something shift inside his heart. He had served many royals, but none had ever shown such genuine concern for his comfort. The castle gardener, Thomas Wright, experienced George's kindness during a particularly difficult day. Thomas had been working to prepare the rose garden for an upcoming charity event when a sudden rain shower threatened to ruin hours of careful work. As he rushed to cover the delicate flower arrangements, he was surprised to see Prince George running toward him with a large tarp. "I saw you from the window," George explained as they worked together to protect the flowers. "I thought you could use some help." They worked side by side in the drizzling rain, and Thomas was amazed at how the young prince didn't seem to care that his expensive clothes were getting muddy and wet. All that mattered to George was helping save the beautiful garden that brought joy to so many visitors. As weeks passed, more stories emerged of George's quiet acts of kindness. The night cleaning staff talked about how he would sometimes appear in the hallways with warm drinks and homemade cookies, making sure they knew their hard work was appreciated. The security team shared stories of how he would ask about their families and remember details about their personal lives. One particularly touching incident occurred when Mary Thompson, a housekeeper, received bad news about her sick mother. George happened to see her crying in an empty hallway and, without saying a word, sat down beside her on the floor. He didn't ask questions or try to fix anything. He simply sat with her in silence, offering the comfort of his presence until she felt ready to continue with her day. "He has an old soul," Mary told her colleagues later. "That little boy understands things that most adults never learn." The castle staff began to see Prince George not just as a member of the royal family, but as someone who truly cared about them as human beings. His kindness was never performed for cameras or public recognition. It came from a genuine place in his heart, and everyone who experienced it felt transformed by the encounter. What made George's actions even more remarkable was their consistency. Day after day, week after week, he continued to notice the needs of others and respond with quiet compassion. He never made a show of his kindness, never expected praise, and never treated his acts of service as anything extraordinary. To him, it was simply the right way to live. As winter approached and the castle grew busier with holiday preparations, the staff worked longer hours and faced increased pressure. But they carried with them the warmth of knowing that someone cared about them, someone noticed their efforts, and someone valued them as people rather than just servants. Prince George's silent kindness had begun to create ripples throughout the castle, touching hearts and changing lives in ways that would soon become impossible to ignore. The winter months brought new challenges to the castle, and with them new opportunities for Prince George to show his caring nature. The heating system in the staff quarters had broken down during a particularly cold week in December, and many of the workers were struggling to stay warm during their long shifts. George learned about the problem when he overheard two maids discussing it in hushed tones near the library. Without telling anyone, he quietly gathered extra blankets from storage rooms throughout the castle and left them in the staff break room with a simple note: "To keep you warm. Thank you for all you do." The gesture meant more to the staff than any expensive gift could have. Sarah Phillips, a young maid who had recently started working at the castle, found herself overwhelmed with emotion when she discovered the soft wool blanket with the handwritten note. She had been worried about how she would afford proper winter clothes on her small salary, and the prince's thoughtfulness felt like a miracle. During this same period, George noticed that Robert Harrison, an elderly groundskeeper, had been limping more than usual. Robert had worked at the castle for 40 years and took great pride in maintaining the beautiful outdoor spaces. But his aging body was beginning to struggle with the physical demands of his job. Instead of mentioning Robert's difficulty to his parents or other adults, George took a different approach. He began appearing in the gardens during his free time, quietly helping with lighter tasks like organizing tools or sweeping pathways. He would work alongside Robert without drawing attention to the man's limitations, simply offering companionship and assistance where it was needed most. "You don't have to help me, Your Highness," Robert said one afternoon as they worked together to clear fallen leaves from a garden path. "I like being here," George replied honestly. "You teach me things about the plants and flowers. Besides, my hands work just as well as anyone else's." Robert's weathered face broke into a grateful smile. In all his years of service, no member of the royal family had ever spent time learning about his work or treating him as an equal. The boy's humble attitude and genuine interest touched something deep in the old man's heart. As Christmas approached, the castle buzzed with activity. Preparations for holiday celebrations required extra effort from everyone, and the stress was beginning to show on many faces. George watched as the people around him worked longer hours and dealt with increased pressure from demanding schedules. During this busy time, George made a decision that surprised everyone. He asked his mother if he could skip some of his usual holiday activities to help the staff with their preparations. Princess Catherine was puzzled by her son's request, but agreed to let him spend his time as he wished. George could be found in different areas of the castle each day, quietly assisting wherever help was needed most. In the kitchen, he helped package homemade treats that would be given to local charities. In the main halls, he assisted with hanging decorations, his small hands perfect for reaching into tight corners and detailed work. One of the most touching moments occurred when George discovered that Maria Santos, a cleaning lady, would be working on Christmas Eve instead of spending time with her young children. Her husband had lost his job and she couldn't afford to take the day off without pay. George approached his parents with a carefully thought-out request. He asked if the castle could arrange for Maria's children to spend Christmas Eve at the palace, where they could be with their mother while she worked and enjoy the beautiful decorations and holiday atmosphere. It would make Christmas special for everyone, George explained to his parents. Maria works so hard and her children shouldn't have to miss being with their mother on Christmas Eve. Prince William and Princess Catherine were moved by their son's compassion and immediately arranged for Maria's family to spend the holiday at the castle. The joy on Maria's face when she learned she wouldn't have to choose between work and family brought tears to many eyes. But George's kindness didn't stop there. He spent Christmas Eve morning with Maria's children, showing them around the castle, sharing stories, and making sure they felt welcome and comfortable. He treated them not as visitors or charity cases, but as honored guests whose presence made the holiday more meaningful for everyone. The castle staff watched in amazement as the young prince gave up his own Christmas Eve plans to ensure that a working mother could spend time with her children. His actions spoke louder than any royal speech or charitable donation could have. As the new year began, George's reputation for kindness continued to grow among the castle workers. They began to notice that their jobs felt different somehow. The atmosphere in the castle had changed, becoming warmer and more family-like. People smiled more often, helped each other without being asked, and took greater pride in their work. Jennifer Walsh, the head of housekeeping, realized that George's influence was spreading throughout the entire staff. People were following his example, treating each other with greater kindness and respect. Arguments became less common and cooperation increased naturally. "That little boy is teaching us all how to be better people," Jennifer told her husband one evening. "He doesn't preach or lecture. He just shows us what kindness looks like through his actions." The security team, led by Captain David Richardson, began to notice changes in their daily routines as well. George would often pause to ask about their families, remember important events in their lives, and show genuine interest in their well-being. This personal attention created a stronger sense of loyalty and dedication among the guards. Captain Richardson had served in the military for 20 years before joining the Royal Protection Team, and he had never encountered a member of the royal family who showed such genuine care for the people who served them. George's kindness created an atmosphere of mutual respect that made everyone's job more meaningful. One particularly memorable incident occurred when George learned that Michael O'Brien, a young guard, was struggling to read English well enough to advance in his position. Rather than ignore this problem or mention it to adults who might handle it officially, George quietly offered to help. Every Tuesday and Thursday after his own lessons, George would meet with Michael in the library for informal reading practice. They would read newspapers together, discuss current events, and work on vocabulary that would help Michael in his professional development. "Your Highness, you don't need to spend your time helping me," Michael said during one of their sessions. "Everyone deserves to learn and grow," George replied simply. "Besides, you help keep my family safe every day. This is the least I can do to help you." These tutoring sessions continued for months, and Michael's reading skills improved dramatically. More importantly, his confidence grew, and he eventually received the promotion he had been working toward. The knowledge that a young prince had invested time and effort in his success filled Michael with a sense of worth and determination that changed his entire outlook on life. The ripple effects of George's kindness continued to spread. Throughout the castle community, staff members began to look out for each other more actively, offering help and support in ways they never had before. The prince's example had created a culture of compassion that transformed the workplace into something resembling a caring family. As spring arrived at Windsor Castle, the beautiful gardens began to bloom with new life, and so did the stories of Prince George's extraordinary compassion. The castle staff had begun to document their experiences with the young prince, sharing tales that seemed almost too wonderful to believe, yet were witnessed by dozens of people every day. One of the most remarkable incidents occurred during the annual spring cleaning of the castle. This massive undertaking required every member of the housekeeping staff to work together for several weeks. Deep cleaning rooms that were rarely accessed by the public The work was physically demanding and often monotonous. But this year felt different because of George's involvement. The prince had asked permission to help with the spring cleaning, explaining to his parents that he wanted to understand how the castle was maintained and cared for. What began as a learning experience quickly became something much more meaningful for everyone involved. George worked alongside the cleaning staff, moving furniture, washing windows, and organizing storage areas. But what impressed the workers most was his attitude. He never complained about the hard work, never acted as though the tasks were beneath him, and never expected special treatment because of his royal status. During one particularly difficult day, the team was cleaning a series of rooms in the old tower that hadn't been thoroughly cleaned in years. The work was dusty, tiring, and seemed endless. Several staff members were becoming discouraged when George appeared with a cart full of cold drinks, fresh fruit, and sandwiches. "I thought everyone might be getting hungry," he said simply, beginning to distribute the refreshments to the surprised workers. But what happened next touched everyone's hearts even more deeply. As the staff sat down to rest and eat, George remained standing, continuing to work on organizing a closet that had been giving the team trouble all morning. "Your Highness, please sit and rest with us," called out Patricia Miller, one of the senior housekeepers. George looked up from his work with a gentle smile. "I'll rest when everyone's work is caught up," he replied. "We're all in this together." This moment became legendary among the castle staff. Here was a future king, choosing to continue working while his servants rested, treating them as equals and putting their comfort before his own. Many of the workers later said that this single incident changed how they viewed their jobs and their relationship with the royal family forever. The story of George's work ethic during spring cleaning spread beyond the castle walls. When one of the groundskeepers mentioned it to a friend who worked for a local newspaper. However, instead of seeking publicity, the staff members who had witnessed George's kindness became fiercely protective of his privacy, refusing to speak to reporters or share details that might exploit the young prince's genuine goodness. As weeks passed, George continued to find new ways to support the people around him. When he learned that Lisa Anderson, a kitchen assistant, was saving money to attend culinary school, he quietly asked his parents about the possibility of providing educational scholarships for castle employees. "Many of the people who work here have dreams and goals," George explained to his mother one evening. "Maybe we could help them achieve those dreams, like they help us every day." This conversation led to the establishment of the Windsor Castle Staff Development Fund, a program that would provide educational opportunities for employees who wanted to advance their skills or pursue new careers. While the fund was officially created by Prince William and Princess Catherine, everyone knew that the inspiration had come from their thoughtful young son. George's influence began to extend beyond individual acts of kindness to broader changes in how the royal household operated. He noticed that the staff dining area was cramped and uncomfortable, so he suggested that one of the unused rooms be converted into a more pleasant break space for employees. He observed that many workers had to stand during their brief rest periods because there weren't enough chairs, so he arranged for additional furniture to be moved from storage. He saw that the staff had limited access to reading materials during their breaks, so he organized donations of books and magazines for their enjoyment. Each improvement might have seemed small on its own, but together, they created a significant enhancement in the daily lives of the castle workers. More importantly, they demonstrated that someone in authority cared about their comfort and well-being. One of the most powerful examples of George's empathy occurred when tragedy struck one of the castle families. William Chen, a security guard, received devastating news that his father in China was seriously ill and unlikely to recover. William was heartbroken, but felt he couldn't afford to take time off work to visit his dying father. When George learned about William's situation, he was deeply moved by the man's impossible choice between his job and his family. Without hesitation, George approached his parents about helping William travel to China to be with his father during this difficult time. "William has protected our family for 3 years," George told his parents. "Now his family needs him and we should protect his job while he's away." The royal family immediately granted William paid leave and helped arrange his travel to China. But George's compassion didn't stop there. He personally wrote a letter to William's father, expressing his hopes for the man's recovery and his gratitude for William's dedicated service to the royal family. "William, later shared that receiving a handwritten letter from Prince George was one of the most meaningful gifts his father received during his illness. The elderly man was so moved by the young prince's thoughtfulness that he framed the letter and kept it beside his hospital bed until his peaceful passing several weeks later. When William returned to the castle after his father's funeral, he found that George had organized a small memorial service with the other staff members. They had prepared a memory book filled with condolences and shared stories about William's father, based on the stories William had told them over the years. "Your father raised a good man," George told William quietly after the service. "He would be proud to know how much you mean to all of us here." This level of personal attention and care from a young prince created ripple effects throughout the entire castle community. Other staff members began to feel more comfortable sharing their personal struggles and celebrations, knowing that they were surrounded by people who genuinely cared about their lives beyond their work duties. The maintenance supervisor, Frank Thompson, began organizing voluntary service projects where staff members helped each other with personal projects during their time off. The kitchen staff started preparing special meals for employees celebrating birthdays or personal milestones. The administrative team created a system for sharing important family news and supporting each other through difficult times. All of these positive changes could be traced back to the example set by Prince George, whose simple acts of kindness had created a culture of caring that transformed the entire workplace. People began to take more pride in their work, not just because they were serving the royal family, but because they felt valued and appreciated as human beings. The gardening staff noticed that visitors to the castle often commented on the positive atmosphere they encountered. Tour guides reported that guests frequently mentioned how happy and friendly all the employees seemed to be. The transformation was becoming visible even to people who only spent a few hours at the castle. As summer approached, plans began for the annual Castle Charity Garden Party, an event that would bring hundreds of visitors to Windsor. But this year, the staff approached the preparations with unusual enthusiasm, inspired by the knowledge that their young prince saw their work as truly important and meaningful. The annual Windsor Castle Charity Garden Party was always a significant event, but this year held special meaning for everyone involved in its preparation. The staff worked with unprecedented dedication and joy, inspired by months of experiencing Prince George's genuine appreciation for their efforts. However, what would happen during this elegant afternoon would forever change how people viewed the young prince and the nature of true leadership. The guest list included foreign diplomats, business leaders, celebrities, and prominent charity representatives. Everything had been meticulously planned, from the placement of elegant pavilions throughout the gardens to the coordination of multiple catering teams and security details. The castle staff had worked for weeks to ensure that every detail would be perfect. On the morning of the event, George could be found throughout the castle, checking on different teams and offering words of encouragement. He helped arrange flowers in the main pavilion, assisted with final preparations in the kitchen, and even helped the security team test their communication equipment. "Everything looks beautiful," he told Mrs. Davies, who was overseeing the final placement of table linens. "The guests are going to be amazed by how wonderful everything looks." His words of appreciation meant more to the hard-working staff than any amount of overtime pay could have. They had poured their hearts into making this event special, and knowing that the young prince recognized their efforts filled them with pride and satisfaction. As guests began arriving in the early afternoon, the garden party unfolded exactly as planned. The weather was perfect, the gardens were in full bloom, and the atmosphere was elegant and refined. Prince George, dressed in his formal attire, greeted guests alongside his parents and other family members, demonstrating the poise and courtesy expected of a future king. But those who knew George well noticed something different about his behavior during the event. His eyes frequently wandered to the staff members working quietly in the background, ensuring that everything ran smoothly. He seemed more aware than usual of the people serving drinks, managing the buffet tables, and maintaining order in the gardens. The first extraordinary moment occurred when George noticed that James, one of the young servers, had accidentally spilled red wine on his white serving jacket. The young man was clearly distressed, knowing that his stained uniform made him look unprofessional in front of such important guests. Without hesitation, George quietly excused himself from a conversation with a foreign ambassador and approached James. Speaking in a low voice so as not to draw attention, George quickly removed his own formal jacket and offered it to the surprised server. "Take this," George whispered. "We're about the same size. No one will notice if I'm not wearing a jacket, but your uniform needs to look perfect." James was overwhelmed by this gesture, but George insisted, helping him put on the expensive royal jacket. For the remainder of the afternoon, the young prince circulated among the guests in just his white shirt and tie, while the castle server wore the Prince of Wales' formal jacket with pride. This exchange was witnessed by several guests, including Lady Margaret Thornton, a longtime family friend who later described it as one of the most gracious acts she had ever seen from anyone, regardless of age or social position. The second remarkable incident occurred later in the afternoon, when an elderly guest, Sir Harold Pemberton, became dizzy and needed to sit down quickly. The nearest chair was occupied by personal belongings, and Sir Harold appeared to be struggling to remain standing. Before any of the adult royals or security personnel could respond, George appeared at Sir Harold's side. The prince not only quickly cleared the chair but also fetched a glass of water and remained with the gentleman until he felt better. George's quick thinking and natural instinct to help prevented what could have been a serious medical incident. "That young man has the heart of a true leader," Sir Harold told Prince William later. "His immediate response to help someone in need shows character that cannot be taught." However, the most significant moment of the afternoon was yet to come. As the event was drawing to a close and guests were beginning to say their farewells, a sudden crisis developed in the kitchen. The main dishwashing machine had broken down, leaving mountains of elegant china, crystal glasses, and silverware that needed to be hand-washed before the catering company could pack up their equipment. The kitchen staff faced an impossible task. They were exhausted from hours of preparation and service, and the manual washing of hundreds of delicate pieces would take well into the evening. Several staff members began to look overwhelmed as they contemplated the enormous job ahead of them. George, who had been making his final rounds to thank the workers, arrived in the kitchen just as the crisis was becoming apparent. He quickly assessed the situation and, without a moment's hesitation, removed his formal cufflinks, rolled up his sleeves, and approached the washing stations. "I'll help with the dishes," he announced simply, picking up a dish towel. The kitchen staff was stunned. Here was a prince who had just finished hosting some of the most important people in the world, offering to wash dishes like any other member of the team. "Your Highness, you can't possibly," began Marcus, the head chef. "Why not?" George interrupted with a smile. "I have 2 hands, and they work just like everyone else's. Besides, this is important work that needs to be done." Word of what was happening in the kitchen spread quickly among the remaining staff members. One by one, other employees began appearing to help with the cleanup. Security guards came in during their break times. Administrative staff stayed late to assist. Even some of the drivers waiting to transport guests offered to help. But it was the image of Prince George, the future king, working side by side with the kitchen staff that created an unforgettable impression on everyone present. He worked steadily and cheerfully for over 2 hours, washing, drying, and carefully packing away expensive dinnerware. During this time, several guests who hadn't yet departed noticed the unusual activity in the kitchen. Lord Christopher Davidson, a prominent businessman, later told reporters that seeing the young prince working alongside the staff was the most inspiring example of leadership and humility he had ever witnessed. Most children his age would have considered their duties finished once the guests were gone, Lord Davidson explained. But Prince George understood that the work wasn't complete until everyone's work was complete. That's the mark of someone who truly understands service to others. As the evening wound down and the last pieces of china were carefully packed away, the kitchen staff gathered around George to express their gratitude. Many had tears in their eyes as they thanked him for his help and his respect for their work. "Today was perfect because of all of you," George told the assembled workers. "Thank you for making everything so special for our guests. You should all be very proud of what you accomplished." The head chef, Marcus Sullivan, who had worked for the royal family for 15 years, later said that this was the moment he truly understood what kind of king George would someday become. "I've seen many royals come and go," Marcus explained to his wife that evening. "But I've never seen one who understood that leadership means serving others, not being served by them. That boy gets it in a way that gives me hope for the future." The story of Prince George washing dishes after the garden party spread throughout the castle within hours. Staff members who hadn't been present heard detailed accounts from their colleagues, and everyone felt a renewed sense of pride in their work and their workplace. More importantly, the event marked a turning point in how the castle staff viewed their relationship with the royal family. George had demonstrated through his actions that he saw them as partners in important work, rather than simply as servants. This recognition transformed not just their daily experience, but their understanding of their own dignity and worth. The weeks following the garden party brought an unexpected development that would test Prince George's character in ways no one could have anticipated. Word of his extraordinary behavior had begun to spread beyond the castle walls, creating ripple effects throughout the royal protection services, and eventually reaching the highest levels of palace security. Captain David Richardson, who had been observing George's interactions with the staff for months, found himself in an unusual position. As head of the prince's security detail, his primary responsibility was ensuring George's safety and maintaining proper protocol. However, George's genuine kindness and respect for others had created a situation that challenged traditional royal security procedures. The problem began when Richardson realized that George's regular interactions with castle staff were making it difficult to maintain the careful distance that security protocols typically required between royals and their employees. Traditional security thinking suggested that too much familiarity between protected persons and staff could create security vulnerabilities. However, Richardson had witnessed firsthand the positive effects of George's approach. The staff's genuine love and respect for the young prince actually created an additional layer of security, as dozens of people throughout the castle had become personally invested in his well-being and safety. This contradiction between standard protocol and observed reality led to numerous discussions among the security team. Some guards argued for maintaining traditional distance and formal relationships. Others, who had experienced George's kindness personally, believed that his approach was creating stronger security through earned loyalty and genuine care. The debate came to a head when Richardson received instructions from palace security headquarters to reassess and adjust the current security arrangements around Prince George. The implication was clear. Someone in authority was concerned about the young prince's informal relationships with castle staff. Richardson faced an impossible choice. Following strict protocol would mean creating barriers between George and the people he had grown to care about, essentially forcing him to abandon the kindness that had become such a natural part of his character. Ignoring the directive, however, could jeopardize Richardson's career and potentially compromise his ability to protect George effectively. The captain decided to approach this challenge the same way George would, with honesty, directness, and genuine concern for everyone involved. He requested a private meeting with Prince William and Princess Catherine to discuss the situation openly. "Your Highnesses," Richardson began carefully, "I need to share some observations about Prince George's security arrangements and ask for your guidance on a sensitive matter." He went on to explain the concerns raised by headquarters about George's close relationships with staff members, but he also shared specific examples of how the prince's kindness had actually enhanced security by creating a network of people who were genuinely committed to his protection. In 15 years of royal protection work, Richardson concluded, "I've never seen anything like the loyalty and dedication that Prince George has inspired among the castle staff. They watch out for him not because it's their job, but because they genuinely care about his well-being." Prince William and Princess Catherine listened carefully to Richardson's report, asking detailed questions about specific incidents and the overall security implications of their son's approach to relationships with staff. After considerable discussion, Princess Catherine made a request that surprised Richardson. "Captain, we'd like you to arrange for us to meet with some of the staff members who have worked closely with George. We want to hear their perspectives directly before making any decisions." Over the next few days, Richardson organized a series of private conversations between the royal parents and various castle employees. These meetings provided Prince William and Princess Catherine with deeper insights into their son's character and the genuine impact of his kindness on the people around him. Mrs. Davies, the housekeeper who had been one of the first to experience George's helpfulness, spoke with quiet emotion about how the young prince's respect had renewed her pride in her work. after 30 years of service. "He sees us as people," she told the royal couple simply, "not just as staff but as human beings with feelings and families and dreams. That makes all of us want to do our very best for him and for your family." Marcus, the head chef, shared similar sentiments, explaining how George's willingness to help in the kitchen had created a team atmosphere that improved everyone's work performance and job satisfaction. "The kitchen runs more smoothly now than it ever has," Marcus reported. "People care more about their work because they know their efforts are noticed and appreciated. Prince George's example has made us all better at our jobs." Perhaps the most powerful testimony came from Michael O'Brien, the young guard whom George had helped learn to read more effectively. Michael's improved skills had led to a promotion, and his enhanced confidence had made him more effective in his security duties. "Prince George's kindness didn't compromise security," Michael explained earnestly. "It made me more committed to protecting him and more capable of doing my job well. When someone invests in your success, you want to prove worthy of that investment." After hearing from multiple staff members, Prince William and Princess Catherine reached a decision that would have far-reaching implications for royal protocol. They requested that Captain Richardson prepare a detailed report documenting the positive security effects of George's approach, to be presented to Palace Security Headquarters. The report, which Richardson spent several weeks preparing, included specific examples of how George's relationships with staff had enhanced rather than compromised his protection. It documented improved morale, increased vigilance, and stronger communication throughout the security network. More importantly, the report challenged fundamental assumptions about royal security by demonstrating that genuine kindness and respect could create more effective protection than traditional distance and formality. When the report was submitted to headquarters, it sparked intense discussions among royal protection specialists. Some traditionalists remained skeptical, but the documented evidence of improved security outcomes was difficult to ignore. Meanwhile, George continued his daily interactions with castle staff, unaware of the high-level debates his kindness had triggered. He helped with preparations for upcoming events, checked on staff members who had been ill, and continued to treat everyone around him with the same natural respect and consideration that had become his trademark. The resolution came when Sir Charles Whitfield, the senior royal protection coordinator, made an unprecedented decision to visit Windsor Castle personally to observe George's interactions with staff and assess the security implications firsthand. During his 3-day visit, Sir Charles witnessed numerous examples of the extraordinary loyalty and dedication that George had inspired among the castle workers. He saw how staff members naturally positioned themselves to provide additional eyes and ears for the security team, how they communicated potential concerns more effectively because of their personal investment in George's safety, and how the overall atmosphere of mutual respect had created a more secure environment for everyone. On the final day of his visit, Sir Charles experienced George's character directly when the young prince noticed that the visitor looked tired after a long day of meetings and observations. "Would you like some tea, Sir Charles?" George asked politely. "You've been working very hard to keep everyone safe. I could ask Mrs. Davies to prepare something special for you." This simple gesture of consideration, from the young prince to a senior security official, crystallized everything Sir Charles had observed during his visit. Here was genuine leadership in action, the kind of character that inspired others to give their best effort not through fear or obligation, but through genuine loyalty and respect. Sir Charles returned to headquarters with a recommendation that would change royal security protocols. Prince George's approach should be studied and, where appropriate, adopted as a model for other members of the royal family. His kindness had not only maintained security standards but had actually elevated them by creating deeper, more effective protection through earned loyalty. The transformation at Windsor Castle had reached a point where something extraordinary was about to happen, something that had never occurred in the long history of royal protocol. The cumulative effect of Prince George's kindness over many months had created a situation so unique that it would require unprecedented action from the people whose job it was to protect him. The moment that would change, everything began on a crisp autumn morning when tragic news reached the castle. Thomas Wright, the elderly gardener who had worked alongside George during countless afternoons in the rose gardens, had suffered a severe heart attack and was in critical condition at the local hospital. George learned about Thomas's condition when he arrived at the gardens for his usual morning walk and found the other groundskeepers standing together in worried conversation. The devastating news hit him harder than anyone expected. Thomas had become more than just a castle employee to George. He had been a teacher, a friend, and a gentle guide who had shared his knowledge of plants and flowers with genuine joy. Without hesitation, George asked Captain Richardson if he could visit Thomas in the hospital. The request created an immediate security challenge as hospital visits required extensive advance preparation, security sweeps, and coordination with local authorities. However, Richardson could see the genuine distress in George's eyes and promised to explore the possibilities. While security arrangements were being discussed, George did something that moved the entire castle staff to tears. He spent the day creating a memory book, filled with photographs of the gardens Thomas had lovingly maintained, along with handwritten notes from various staff members sharing their favorite memories of working with the kind gardener. George contributed his own letter, written in careful handwriting that revealed the depth of his genuine affection for Thomas. Dear Thomas, you taught me that taking care of beautiful things is one of the most important jobs anyone can have. The gardens are beautiful because of your love and hard work. I hope you get better soon so we can plant the spring flowers together. When the memory book was complete, George asked if someone could take it to the hospital immediately, even if he couldn't go himself. The urgency in his voice and the obvious love he felt for the ailing gardener touched everyone who witnessed his concern. However, what happened next surprised everyone at the castle. Led by Mrs. Davies, a group of senior staff members approached Captain Richardson with an unprecedented request. They asked if they could organize a vigil at the hospital, taking turns staying with Thomas so he wouldn't be alone during this critical time. Thomas has been like family to all of us, Mrs. Davies explained to Richardson, but we know that Prince George's friendship meant more to Thomas than anything else in these past months. If His Royal Highness can't be there, we want to be there for both of them. Richardson was moved by this request, but he was also concerned about the security implications of having multiple castle staff members at the hospital simultaneously. After consulting with his team, however, he realized that the staff's genuine love for George and their desire to support him during this difficult time actually represented an additional layer of protection rather than a security risk. The vigil began that evening, with different staff members taking shifts to sit with Thomas and his family. They brought the memory book George had created, and Thomas's wife later said that seeing the evidence of how much the young prince cared about her husband had given Thomas strength during his darkest hours. George, meanwhile, was struggling with feelings he had never experienced before. The possibility of losing someone he genuinely cared about was causing him to question things he had taken for granted. He spent hours walking through the gardens Thomas had maintained, touching plants the old man had taught him about, and remembering conversations they had shared. On the third day of Thomas's hospitalization, when doctors reported that his condition had stabilized but remained serious, George made a decision that surprised his parents. He asked if he could write a letter to the Queen, his great-grandmother, requesting permission to visit Thomas officially. I know it's complicated because of security, George explained to his mother, but Thomas is important to me. If I'm going to be king someday, shouldn't I be able to visit people I care about when they need me? The simplicity and sincerity of George's question challenged assumptions about royal duty and protocol that had existed for generations. Princess Catherine found herself unable to provide a satisfactory answer about why caring for people should be complicated by royal status. George's letter to the Queen was brief but powerful. Dear Great-Grandmama, Thomas Wright has been my teacher and friend. He is very sick, and I would like to visit him to show that I care about him the way he has cared for me and for our gardens. I understand that royal visits are complicated, but I think caring for people should be simple. May I please have your permission to visit Thomas? The Queen's response came faster than anyone expected. She not only granted permission for the hospital visit, but requested that Prince William arrange for her to meet with George to discuss his understanding of royal duty and service to others. During their conversation, the Queen listened carefully as George explained his belief that being royal meant having more opportunities to help people, not more barriers to caring relationships. His perspective was so clear and compelling that it prompted the Queen to reconsider long-standing protocols about royal interactions with staff members. The hospital visit was arranged with minimal security disruption, and George's reunion with Thomas became one of the most touching moments in recent royal history. Despite his weakened condition, Thomas's face lit up when he saw the young prince enter his room carrying fresh flowers from the castle gardens. "I brought these from the rose garden," George said softly, placing the flowers where Thomas could see them easily. "They're not as beautiful as they would be if you had arranged them, but I tried to remember what you taught me." Thomas, speaking with difficulty, managed to tell George how much their friendship had meant to him, and how proud he was of the kind young man George was becoming. The conversation was brief because of Thomas's condition, but both the prince and the gardener seemed to find peace in being able to express their mutual affection and respect. However, the most extraordinary moment was yet to come. As George prepared to leave the hospital, something unprecedented happened in the hallway outside Thomas's room. Captain Richardson, who had been observing the visit while maintaining security protocols, made a decision that shocked everyone present. In full view of hospital staff, security personnel, and several visitors, Captain Richardson stopped walking, came to attention, and performed a formal military salute to Prince George. This was not a casual gesture of respect, but a deliberate, formal acknowledgement of true leadership. Within moments, every member of George's security detail had followed Richardson's example. The hallway filled with uniformed guards and plainclothes security officers, all standing at attention in formal salute to a 10-year-old prince whose kindness had earned their profound respect. The hospital staff, witnessing this unprecedented display of genuine reverence from experienced security professionals, understood that they were seeing something historically significant. These were not people following orders or maintaining protocol. These were seasoned protectors offering voluntary tribute to someone they recognized as a true leader. George, surprised and somewhat overwhelmed by this display, responded in the way that had become characteristic of his approach to everything. He thanked each security officer individually for their service and protection, shook hands with those not in formal salute positions, and expressed his gratitude for their help in making the hospital visit possible. "Thank you for helping me be here for Thomas," he told Captain Richardson. "This meant everything to both of us." As they left the hospital that day, Richardson realized that he and his entire team had just participated in a moment that would be remembered and discussed among Royal Protection Services for generations to come. They had voluntarily stepped down from their traditional position of authority to show respect for someone whose character had earned their genuine admiration. The image of experienced security professionals saluting a young prince in a hospital hallway became symbolic of how George's silent kindness had transformed not just individual relationships, but entire systems of protocol and respect. His natural compassion had created a new understanding of what true royal leadership could look like. Thomas Wright recovered from his heart attack and returned to work at the castle several months later. But the changes that George's response to his illness had triggered would last far beyond one man's medical crisis. The young prince's insistence on caring for people regardless of protocol complications had opened new discussions about the nature of royal duty and the importance of genuine human connection in leadership. Most importantly, George had demonstrated that kindness is not a sign of weakness in leadership, but rather the foundation of the kind of authority that inspires others to give their very best effort voluntarily, out of love and respect rather than fear or obligation.